Yes.
Hang on. All righty, I'm going to go back here. Okay, of course, the topic tonight, or the title of what I'm going to be speaking about is, as advertised, is Madeleine Réaume, her life at Fort St. Joseph from 1728 to 1780. And I know that some people out there might be wondering, well, why does he have the picture up there of this little guy talking to this old guy? And actually, that's myself right there as a little boy. And I tell you what, I just turned 70 years old, so I don't know how old that little boy is right there. And but that's me talking to my grandpa. The reason I put that picture up there is for good reasons, because my grandpa was my childhood hero in so many ways. And Grandpa Paquette was Métis. But he referred to himself as French Indian. And when you'd ask him, well, where does that come from? He couldn't tell you names and exactly when it happened, but he would explain that, well, we are, in his exact words, we are Chippewa and Iroquois through our grandmothers who married our French Canadian grandfathers. And so I always wondered about that, particularly because one of the things of interest when I studied history was that it was kind of interesting that he said Iroquois in Anishinaabe or Ojibwa, because they were known not to be friendly to each other through the years. But I really wondered, who were our great grandmothers? Who were these grandmothers? And so I knew there was also only one way to find out, and that was, of course, to do the actual research. And it was actually not just historical research, but it was to do real genealogical research. I had to go back in time and really trace primary records to figure out, okay, who was who and where did these native great grandmothers come from within my family. And so when you do genealogical research, of course, you start with yourself, and you just start going back in time and go from like, for example, I started with me. I went back to my father, to my grandfather, to my great grandfathers, and tried to provide all of the actual documentation that would tell me who was really who. In other words, you're looking for birth records, baptismal records. You're looking for definitely marriage records, and when you can, you're also looking for death records. And those are the kind of records that will tell you who's who when you're doing genealogical research. And I was able to track back, believe it or not. I went back on it. I'm not seeing my full screen there, but hang on. Hopefully, we go back to this here. Oh, it's up again. I hit this thing here. I was able to go through this long line here of direct ancestors doing genealogical research. In other words, finding primary documents. And I was able to go back all the way to a native great grandmother who was, in fact, Iroquois. And her name was, she was listed, her name was Marie-Anne Sauvages. And she was the mother of another native grandmother whose name was listed as Mary Louise Sauvages, which just meant an Indian person. And that was Mary Louise was baptized on July 11, 1688 at Saint Ange de la Chine, which was a fur trading town. And this has become really a quest to really figure out who I am. And along with the research into the Iroquois side of the family, I also got into the Anishinaabe Great Lakes part of my family. And I was able to really nail down the direct lineal descent from what you see your First Nation great grandmother, Simferos Wabakukwe, and the French voyageur interpreter here of the Great Lakes, who was Jean-Baptiste Réaume, who some of you probably have heard of. And I was able to trace back directly to them. And again, it was a tough search. I will say that. It was, again, you had to go back, through all of the records. And it was very tough to do, because once I got past the records from Canada, from the Quebec region, you had to really try to find out what records were here in the Great Lakes region or other places in order to nail down who you were searching for. And I was able to do it. And because I was able to do it, I was able to present that information, that genealogical information, which is a requirement to become a member of the Voyageur Métis organization. As you can see here, this is one of the papers that I filled out. And I also sent along that document that you see in the cover up here in the previous film or the previous slide. And it was that particular information that proved beyond any doubt that I was in fact Métis. And without that proof, I wouldn't have been able to be accepted and approved with Métis status to the Métis Voyageur Métis community. And if you see here, it says this is notification card certifies that James Paquette is recognized as an Aboriginal person and has ancestry, which has been verified as being part of the families of the historic communities of the Voyageur Métis. And I'm also a member of I wish you could see the top of that there, but we can't see it here. I'm also a member of what we call the Muskrat Métis. In that particular community, I'm very proud to be a member of that community, which is also based in Canada, but also here in the lower Great Lakes region of Michigan. And what the Muskrat Métis community is and I'll just read this, is we're a community of Indigenous heritage whose European voyageur grandfathers worked the fur trade in the waterways and tributaries of the Great Lakes. The men married Indigenous Native American women, and these unions melded ways that developed a unique culture in and of itself with its own style of music, art, dance, dress, food, spirituality, kinship, and community. Our ancestors created their own language and customs specific to us, and we are the Muskrat Métis. Now, that brings us to our talk today. And of course, the talk today is you see on the bottom there, Madeleine Réaume, her life at Fort St. Joseph from 1728 to 1780. And of course, Madeleine Réaume was a first generation Métis. Who was she? Well, that's what I had to find out. And now I'm going to be reading from a script here as I go forward here. That's going to match up to what you're going to be seeing here, and I'll try to get through this as quickly as I can. But anyway, if you pay attention to the slides here and just listen to my words, the first recorded mention of Marie Madeleine in any of the early French documents is the March 7th, 1729 entry from the Rivière St. Joseph Mission baptismal register, where her name was recorded by the Jesuit Chardon simply as Marie Réaume, and likewise she signed her name as such as Marie Réaume, as you will see. And one of the things that strikes me here with this is not only the information that this gave me as I was tracking Marie Réaume, but to me it's really an extraordinary event in the early recorded history of the Great Lakes peoples that Marie Madeleine Réaume, who was a first generation mixed heritage Métis woman, actually signed her own name in this March 7, 1729 entry in the St. Joseph baptismal register. And based on my research of surviving documents from various French missions in posts in the Western and Upper Great Lakes area, this is surely one of the earliest surviving recorded signatures ever signed by the hand of a native-born woman from this region. And of course, that handwritten record also names her parents. And this is a transcription of what you just seen written in French. I'm not going to read the French version, although I became pretty adept at reading the French records and that. But what this says is in the year 1729, the 7th of March, I, Jean-Baptiste Chardon, priest and missionary of the Society of Jesus at the River St. Joseph, baptized Joseph, the son of Jean-Baptiste Baron, voyageur from the parish of Bouquerville, at present settled in this post, and of Marie Catherine Wakiyukwe, married in the eyes of the church, baptized the 8th of March, the day following his birth. The godfather was Monsieur Louis Colon de Villiers Jr., and the godmother, Mary Réaume, daughter of Sieur Jean-Baptiste, interpreter, and of Symphoros Wawagukwe, also married in the eyes of the church. Now, no original birth or baptism records have ever been found for Marie Magdalene Réaume, who was born somewhere here in the Western Great Lakes region. But in fact, there are no known surviving birth baptismal records for 3 of the 4 daughters of her parents, Jean-Baptiste and Symphoros, including Mary Magdalene and her sisters Susan and Mary Joseph, all of whom would have been baptized as Roman Catholic according to later records. There is also no known surviving official records of their parents. There is also no known surviving official church records of the marriage of their parents, who were noted, as you've seen in the transcription that I just read, that again, they were married in the eyes of the church. So there's a record out there. There was a record out there somewhere, but we don't know where that is right now, because that would have been recorded by a priest. The only such early church documentation of the baptism of a child from this Western Great Lakes couple that has been found is this abbreviated copied version of the baptism record of one daughter, that being Judith at Michilimackinac in 1725. It is probable that most of the Réaume children were born and baptized in Bay, which of course is in the area of Green Bay, Wisconsin, where their family was known to have maintained a permanent residence for many years. Unfortunately for all of us researchers, none of the early parish records from the mission of St. Francis Xavier have survived to present day. They were probably destroyed in a fire, is what is thought. But although the actual date of birth, the actual date of birth for Marie Madeleine is unknown, there's a Varennes Parish, Canada record that Mary Madeleine Réaume, the wife of Louis Chevalier, was 70 years old at the time of her death there, when she was living there at that time in February of 1784. So if this is accurate, then her birth year would be about 1714. However, there is some evidence that Marie Magdalene may have been born about 1710, based upon other information that was contained in the later translated version of a personal petition from her husband, Louis Chevalier, to the British governor, Frederick Holloman, in which Chevalier stated in June of 1780 that his wife, Marie Magdalene, was 70 years of age at that time. If this is the case, this reference to Mary Réaume, if any case, if this is true, then her birth date would be different than what I just said. It was not until April 25th, 1740, that her full name, Marie Madeleine Réaume, was finally recorded for the first time in the St. Joseph Baptismal Directory. This was also the first time that she signed her name as such, and you can see it here at that she signs it right here as Marie Madeleine in this particular document. Mary Madeleine, as a teenager, had moved to Rivière St. Joseph with her father and mother from their home at La Baie in the summer of 1728, at the time of the French abandonment of that post during the Second Meskwaki or Fox War. Her father, Jean Baptiste, had been a longtime active fur trader in the Western Great Lakes for the past 30 years prior to that move. At the time of their arrival at Fort St. Joseph, he was also a scout and official agent for French interests in the Lake Michigan region, serving during the Meskwaki War as the, quote, king's interpreter for Nicholas Antoine Coulon de Villiers, who was the commandant from Rivière St. Joseph, who was also the commander of all French forces in the region. The following summer, in July of 1729, Jean Baptiste was thus noted in various fur trade documents as a voyageur and interpreter at Rivière St. Joseph. You can see these are some of the notary records here as they were translated. And also, the following summer of 1730, while living at St. Joseph, other notary records indicate that Jean Baptiste was in self-hiring voyageurs, some destined for Michilimackinac in the Lake Michigan region. Now, regarding Mary Madeleine's mother, Simferose Wawagukwe, very little is known of the life of Wawagukwe, except that which we can gather based primarily on church and fur trade records, notary records associated with her husband, Jean Baptiste, and her children. Thus far, no official birth, baptismal, or death records have been found for Wawagukwe in any of the early French records. The first recorded mention of her first name, of her First Nation name that has been identified in a surviving primary document, of course, is that March 7th, 1929 entry in the original St. Joseph Mission baptismal register at Rivière St. Joseph, where Jesuit Father Jean Baptiste Chardon recorded her name as you can see there, Simferose Wawagukwe. 18 years later, however, Jesuit Father Pierre Dugenet recorded her name as Simferose Wawagukwe in a 1747 entry in the St. Ignace Mission Michilimackinac Register of Marriages, as you can see here. Although Wawagukwe, and I'm going to keep referring to her by that name, is mentioned by her First Nation name in these early French records at Rivière St. Joseph and then at Michilimackinac, it is still yet unknown where she was born and raised in the Great Lakes area, as the early documents do not identify what specific Indian community that she came from. And it's also possible that Wawagukwe originated from somewhere other than in the Western Great Lakes region. That still remains to be discovered. In any case, Wawagukwe has been described by many genealogical researchers and historians as being Anishinaabe, or of the Three Fires Council tribes of Potawatomi, Ojibwa, or Ottawa. She has been erroneously described as being from the Illini Confederate tribes or Illinois Indian. She is not that. Linguistic evidence from the 18th century Algonquian language linguist Michael McCafferty from Indiana University has offered evidence that Wawagukwe was probably Anishinaabe. In an August 23rd, 2014 communication with Susan Somerville regarding his study of Wawagukwe's name as it was recorded the 2 times by the French Jesuits, here's what McCarthy concluded. He said there is something that would clinch it for the Ojibwa-Ottawa-Potawatomi case, and that's the G in Wawagukwe. Here, Wag is wak, bent meaning bent or crooked. The term is the same in both Ojibwa-Ottawa-Potawatomi in Miami, Illinois. However, Ojibwa-Ottawa-Potawatomi can voice the K to the G. Miami and Illinois probably don't do that. In Miami, Illinois, the word is wak is pronounced wak, and it's not pronounced wag. So the clincher for Wawagukwe as being Ojibwe or Anishinaabe, when he puts in there, if the name is legit, since both names refer to the same person, one of them, it seems, would have to have been a miswritten name or misheard, hence miswritten name, or something else went wrong. Now, Wawagukwe means very white woman. Wawagukwe means very bent woman. And so he concluded that she is in fact Anishinaabe based upon the name Wawagukwe. Now, aside from the linguistic evidence, it is also important to consider the fact that her French husband, Jean-Baptiste Réaume, was a longtime official language interpreter for the French and Native peoples who lived in the Le Bay area for many years, plus also in the Rivière St. Joseph area, and was a person who obviously carried influence and respect among these same people. That certainly points to a very good possibility that Wawagukwe was herself a member of one of the local Anishinaabe, Potawatomi, or perhaps even Sauk bands that likely lived in this specific region at that time. This might also help explain Jean-Baptiste's success as a trader in this part of the Western Great Lakes country. Plus, it also gives historical insight as to why Réaume, Wawagukwe, and her children with their later families all lived in Lake Michigan, Le Bay, and Rivière St. Joseph area as prominent residents. In the summer of 1731, the French rebuilt and reoccupied Post Le Bay under the command of de Villiers, at which time Jean-Baptiste and Wawagukwe returned to their home at Le Bay, as recorded in numerous documents of the time, where they apparently lived the remainder of their lives. After the 1729 recording of her name in the baptismal register at St. Joseph, Marie Madeleine is known to have lived at the French Métis Potawatomi settlement at St. Joseph for the next 51 years. Thus far, no record has been found of a First Nation name for her in the early documents, a name which surely would have been given to her by her mother, Symphoros Wawagukwe, and her native family. During Jean-Baptiste Réaume's family's stay at Rivière St. Joseph, a young Marie Madeleine, again probably only in her teens, married a prominent post-resident licensed fur trader and Great Lakes merchant trader named Augustin L'Archevêque. Augustin L'Archevêque was born in March 1772 in Quebec City. He was a member of a much noted family of fur trading merchants, voyageurs, and explorers. He was in fact the son of Jean L'Archevêque, Sieur de Grand Pré, Marchand Bourgeois, and Marchand Tanner de Quebec. Regarding the marriage of Marie Madeleine and Augustin L'Archevêque, no surviving original record of their actual marriage date and place currently exists. Although the Rivière St. Joseph Mission baptismal record of the baptism of their first child, Mary Catherine, states that Mary Madeleine were already married in the eyes of the church, as you can see here. However, a marriage date of September 13, 1721 at Michilimackinac is commonly noted by historians as the date of their marriage. You see that time and time again. This date refers to this incomplete entry in the abbreviated marriage record in the Michilimackinac Register of Marriages, and you can see it up here, and you can see it as it's written. And when I look at it, it looks like 1735. It doesn't look like 1731, but it's been taken at that this Mr. Augustin was in fact Augustin L'Archevêque, and that they were married there in 1735. And I highly doubt that that's the case, even though that's recorded in historical journals. Anyway, it is obvious that from the early records that Augustin lived and traded for many years at Rivière St. Joseph and in Lake Michigan area. This is a reimbursement record from Fort St. Joseph that was dated August 6, 1739, that shows Augustine provided supplies for the French military there and their Indian allies in their war against the Chickasaw. Also, there are numerous surviving notary records for voyageurs who were contracted by Augustine. These are just some of the ones of the many that were listed from 1741. You can see here that Augustine is the one who's contracting in these voyageurs to bring trade goods both to Michilimackinac and to the Poste de Illinois, which is, of course, Fort St. Joseph. In the years while Mary Magdalene and Augustine were married, living at Riviere St. Joseph, she gave birth to 8 daughters and 1 son. These are the names of the daughters, and they all got a story in themselves. And we could be here for the next 2 days if I tell you what I learned about them. But daughter number 1 was Marie Catherine L'Archevêque. Daughter number 2 was Marie Joseph Esther L'Archevêque. Daughter number 3 was Marie Angelique L'Archevêque. Number 4 was Marie Charlotte L'Archevêque. Number 5, Marie Madeleine L'Archevêque. Number 6, Marie Anne L'Archevêque. Number 7, Marie Amable L'Archevêque. Number 8, Marie Agathe L'Archevêque. And of course, there was the son named Augustine, named after his dad, Augustine L'Archevêque. Now, the cause and time of Augustine L'Archevêque's death are unknown, but the early records indicate that he died sometime before the May of 1746 record that you see here. This is a Fort St. Joseph document that records that Mary Magdalene was referred to here as the widow Larche, and she was being reimbursed on May 15, 1746 by the St. Joseph commandant for 1 fat pig, a heifer, an ox, 4 pairs of snowshoes, a bark canoe, and another fat pig. Several years after the death of Augustine, Marie Magdalene had a child named and baptized Louis Chevalier out of wedlock with Louis Therese Chevalier in October of 1751. And this is that particular record. It's a translated record from Fort St. Joseph. Of course, Louis Chevalier was a prominent Michilimackinac, Lake Michigan region fur trader and merchant, very well known in the area. The following spring, Marie Madeleine and Louis were married at Fort St. Joseph. In this following, what you see here on the screen here is a copy of that translated 1752 marriage contract between Marie Madeleine Réaume, the widow of L'Archevêque, and her second husband, Louis Chevalier. Then I bring it to your attention, and there's something that I want to read just the early part of this, because I know as archaeologists, you might be interested in the fact that it gives you a location of where Marie's home was in relation to the fort. And I'll read this, and it says, Louis Chevalier and Marie Magdalene Réaume, widow of Augustine L'Archevêque, before us missionary priests of the Company of Jesus, now present at St. Joseph, and acting as curé, parish priest, in the presence of Monsieur de la Combière Lacorne, lieutenant of the infantry, commandant for the king at the above said post, and of the undersigned witnesses appeared Louis Chevalier, son of the deceased Jean-Baptiste Chevalier, and Manon Alvalon, established at Michilimackinac, Marie Magdalene Réaume, widow of the deceased Augustine L'Archevêque, established at this post, who, during the contract marriage together in the presence of a representative of our Holy Mother Church, have agreed to it follows. Be it known, and pay attention to this, that the said widow declares on her soul and conscience what belongs to the children of her first marriage, which, in effect, she has declared that they had only a house in very poor condition situated at the edge of the fort to the southeast, which is known to all of those assembled, that they recognize that their son Louis, born on the 11th of October, 1751, that the said Chevalier declares on his soul and conscience what he brings to the present marriage. And he goes on to talk about what he brings. But I think it's interesting that they list in there that that Marie Magdalene and her daughters and her son were living in a house in poor condition, and also the location at the edge of the fort to the southeast. And so that's just a clue as to where they were living at that time. Anyway, Mary Magdalene is mentioned quite often in the St. Joseph Mission Baptismal Register through the years, as everyone knows, as she appears as the godmother at the baptisms of 5 of her own grandchildren, 2 Indian converts, including Marie Jean Panis, who was a Panis, and Therese, who was a Potawatomi. and of several other children born to French and native Métis habitants who lived at Fort St. Joseph. There's little doubt that Marie Magdalene would have continued her active participation in the fur trade after her 1752 marriage to the prominent Michilimackinac trader Louis Chevalier, who later became the post merchant and principal French personage at Fort St. Joseph. However, in the ensuing years after her marriage to Chevalier, we find little specific mention of Mary Magdalene in any of the surviving documents of the time, other than in the St. Joseph Mission baptismal records, as I already mentioned. However, she is finally mentioned in a letter written in December of 1772 by Henry Bassett, the British commandant at Detroit, to General Thomas Gage, but she's not mentioned by her name, instead simply as the squaw wife of Louis Chevalier, as you can see here. And this is a copy that is referenced from the papers of William Johnson. And here as you go, I'm informed there's a certain Louis Chevalier, a very bad man, that's married to a squaw and encourages these murders. So they weren't the British's friend, I will say that. 1 year later, in December of 1773, the British trader Cornelius Van Slyck, who was also referred to in that letter, the previous letter that I was just reading from, specifically refers to Marie Madeleine again in the letter that he wrote describing his sort of a terrible ordeal at St. Joseph. But once again, she is not mentioned by her name, but again, she is simply mentioned as a squaw wife of Louis Chevalier. In the letter, Van Slyck describes in some detail how he and his fellow British traders were attacked by several Potawatomi while they were trading at River St. Joseph that previous fall. The original documents, this original document was apparently damaged by fire, but a transcribed copy would still be read of Van Slyck's letters contained again in the papers of Sir William Johnson. In his 1773 narrative of the events that transpired at Rivière St. Joseph the year before, Van Slyck describes the wife of the post-principal French trader Louis Chevalier as being a squaw of the blank Hockey Nation. Of course, Chevalier's wife was Marie Madeleine Réaume at Rivière St. Joseph, who had lived among the Potawatomi for 45 years prior to the time of Van Slyck's letter. In late June of 1780, of course, Marie Madeleine reappears in the early documents in dramatic fashion when she and her husband, Louis Chevalier, along with other family members, were forcibly removed from the Métis French settlement at St. Joseph by British Lieutenant Governor Patrick Sinclair from Fort Michilimackinac. Their influence among Potawatomi people living along the St. Lawrence River in combination with their suspected, and it was more than suspected, anti-English sentiments was viewed by Sinclair as a major threat to British interests in the lower Western Great Lakes region during the American Revolution. This, what you see here, is the well-known June 25th, 1780 census of every woman, child, and slave resident at the post of St. Joseph, as recorded in the 30th of June, 1780 letter from Hines to Lieutenant Governor Sinclair. Okay, now, what you see here is a copy of the same census. It's been translated into English, but it also lists the identifications of the June 1780 named residents actually in the houses of everyone. I did a lot of research on this, trying to identify who these people actually were as they were listed here with their brief names. And of course, what you see here, these are the people who were who were considered residents in the house of Marie Madeleine Réaume and Louis Chevalier. And this again is per my very intense research as to who was living there at that time. And just very quickly here, I'll just go through this. As it says in the house of M. Chevalier, well, that was obviously Louis Chevalier. There's a person named Dugenet, and that's probably more than likely French Lieutenant Dugenet de Quindray, who was there at the post at that time. Guibault was listed, the name Guibault. That's undoubtedly to me Louis Guibault, who was the orphan adult son of Métis, of Marie Anne L'Archevêque and Auguste Guibault, who had both died in Detroit in 1763. This would be the grandson of Marie Magdalene Réaume. Pieniche means it's a native name for Pierre. It just means Pierre, and that is, of course, would be Pierre Guibault, which would be his brother, who was the other orphaned adult son of Marie Anne L'Archevêque and Augustin Guibault. And again, this would be the grandchildren of Marie Magdalene Réaume. Jutra Jr. would be Jean-Baptiste Jr. Jutra Jr. This would be in which he would be is that he would be the son of another son of who you're going to see here. This, of course, would be another grandson of Madeleine Réaume. Here we see Madame Chevalier. Well, of course, that's Marie Madeleine Réaume, L'Archevêque Chevalier. That's her. Then you have Madame Jutra and her daughter. This would be Mary Madeleine's daughter, Marie Catherine L'Archevêque Jutra, and her Métis daughter, Marie Joseph Jutra, who was living there. Robbie Tani was a Pawnee slave, and if I found record of him, actually, he died in Varennes at the age of 25. And his name was recorded there as Michael Robbie Pani, and so you can see who those people were that were living there. Now, and again, those are my best guesses, and I welcome anyone to research that farther. But I can tell you what, they're pretty good guesses. In the house, and also listed here in the same census, it lists the identification of the residents in the house of let's see here. Also lists the name of another of Marie Madeleine Réaume's daughters, that being the family of who you can see here, who is going to be Marie Madeleine L'Archevêque and her husband Francois Marcotte. Now, a lot of people thought this is Jean-Baptiste Marcotte. They're totally wrong. Jean-Baptiste Marcotte never lived at Fort St. Joseph. But Francois Marcotte, there's plenty of evidence that he lived there because he was married to Marie Madeleine L'Archevêque. These were the children that are listed here are the Métis children. And these are from her previous marriage to Pascal Chevalier, that being Amable Pierre, Augustin, and Mary Archange. And at this time, Mary Madeleine had an infant daughter that was just born. Her name was Marie Francois Marcotte. And of course, that would have been the daughter of Francois and Marie Madeleine. So those are the people that were, some of the people that were there. Now, Marie Madeleine and Louis were forced to share. And one of the interesting things here, after the I'll go back here a minute. After her removal from her home at Rivière St. Joseph, Marie Madeleine, her husband, and other members of her extended Rivière St. Joseph family, who I just mentioned, were temporarily detained at Fort Michilimackinac at the Straits. Marie Madeleine, they were forced. This is kind of funny, but they were forced to share, while under arrest, to share a very small cabin of a totally enraged British junior officer. And this right here, it's kind of funny. It's the letter that this junior officer named Mercer, he had sent this to Major de Peyster. And he says, as an issuance of further insult, I have received a message from Lieutenant Governor Sinclair, who was his commandant, that I must give up a room in my house to Mr. and Mrs. Chevalier. I must observe there is only one fireplace in the house. There are soldiers in possession of houses unmolested, and yet an officer is to be thus abused without the possible means of doing himself justice. It was the house of the baker that the baker lived in. Excuse haste, I am, sir, your most humble servant. And he puts P.S. I have remonstrated without effect and denied being allowed the use of my tent. In other words, what he did in another communication, he took a tent and he put it outside. So I'm not sleeping with those two. And Sinclair told him, you get your rear end back in that house. You're not going to live in that. You're not allowed to sleep in that tent. And of course, this lieutenant here was very, very mad because he had to share his home with a Frenchman and with the Métis woman. Anyway, very shortly after that happened, an aging Marie Madeleine was then forced to make the long canoe trip all the way to Montreal from Michilimackinac with the Michilimackinac trader and interpreter Joseph Louis Hines, along with her husband Louis and the families of her daughters Marie Catherine L'Archevêque Jutra and Marie Kathleen L'Archevêque Marcotte, who had all, of course, been removed from the Rivière St. Joseph and placed under arrest at Michilimackinac. And all three canoes were used to transport the families of St. Joseph. And here you can see in this memorial from Joseph Louis Hines, he writes down here, he says, permission to go with him. This was going to Montreal. He's going to go there on a condition that he would take with him Mr. Chevalier, his family, and as many other persons that would be possible. To this effect, he fitted out 2 canoes and was obliged a little beyond Michilimackinac to take a third, having ascertained that there was not sufficient, that they were not sufficient to transport all of these people in their baggage. So they loaded up 3 big canoes. And this, of course, is a copy of his a bill, expense bill that Joseph Ines sent back to Michilimackinac and to the British officers. And when he talks about this is what it cost him to bring the families of St. Joseph up to Montreal, and so he was looking for to be reimbursed for that particular amount of money. Now, on May 23rd, 1781, Louis and Marie Madeleine purchased property in which to live from Ines, who also maintained a residence nearby at Varennes, on the Isle of it's called L'Isle d'Aigle, which just means Eagle Island, in the St. Lawrence River, which is just east of Montreal Island and right across from Varennes. That was it there. This is a copy of what that says in English. This shows you exactly where where they purchased their property. And up in here, this is a Montreal Island. Of course, this is the island that they're talking about where they purchased some property. And this, of course, is Varennes, which sits just to the southeast of the island where they were living. Now, Mary Magdalene and her husband. I always say Mary Magdalene. I'm used to calling her Mary Magdalene. I know she's known as Mary Madeleine, but she's also known as Mary Magdalene. So sometimes I use both names. Anyway, Mary Madeleine and her husband Louis apparently were never able to return to their home at Rivière St. Joseph, where they had, according to these records, and this is from a petition of St. Louis Chevalier to the British governor at the time. And he says, in the neighborhood of Fort St. Joseph, the two of them had 10 houses. Listen to this: 10 houses, good lands, orchards, gardens, cattle, furniture, utensils, and of course debts, of which he has made an entire sacrifice to be obedient to Sinclair. In other words, they had all of these belongings that were back at Fort St. Joseph. I find it interesting that he makes mention to 10 houses. So I'm not quite sure where he went with that, but there you see it in the documents. My research also found, I'll just say this too, that the Mary Madeleine and Louis, they lived the remaining years of their lives in the Montreal, Varennes, St. Vincent de Paul area, where the families of Mary Madeleine's daughter, Mary Catherine L'Archevêque, Utah, and Marie Madeleine L'Archevêque Marcotte had also relocated permanently, and when they relocated to Canada from Rivière St. Joseph. And of course, it was because of that move that the daughter of Marie Madeleine L'Archevêque Marcotte married Antoine Paquette, and so they became direct ancestors of the Paquette family. My research of the early French church records has also found that the three orphaned Rivière St. Joseph born children of Mary Madeleine Réaume's deceased daughter, Marie Angelique, and her late husband, Charles Laville Chevalier, who was also a post merchant at Fort St. Joseph and who died there, including their daughters, Mary Archange, Mary Catherine, and her son Roch, were all permanently relocated also from Rivière St. Joseph, as these grandchildren of Mary Madeleine were living in Canada in 1780. And I confirmed this in the records of St. Francis Xavier de Virché and Notre Dame de Quebec parish records. Okay, so a lot of the St. Joseph residents ended up back in the Montreal area. Now, the next record of Marie Madeleine was in November of 1783, when she served as the godmother at the baptism in St. Francois de Sales of her granddaughter Marie Madeleine Marcotte, and the daughter of Francois Marcotte and her daughter Marie Madeleine L'Archevêque. And you can see it right here as it's listed in there. Now, it was this record right here. I was one record ahead here. This is the record that shows that where she's standing as the godmother, Madeleine Réaume, of Angelique there. Now, this is the record here, the last record that we find of Marie Madeleine, and it was November 1783. It was February 19th, 1784, when Marie Madeleine Réaume died at the age of 70, as written in this parish record. The parish record shows that she received the sacraments of penance and extreme unction from the Catholic Church, and that she was buried the day after her death on February 20th. And this was witnessed by a number of people, including, once again, Monsieur Joseph Louis Ines, who had sold them the property up there and who had actually canoed them all the way up to the Montreal area. When she died, it's interesting to me, in Canada in 1784, her name was recorded for the very last time, just as that has been recorded for the very first time at Riviere St. Joseph in 1729. Her name was recorded simply as Marie Réaume. Okay, so Grandpa Paquette was right when he talked about our Paquette ancestry, and he identified Marie-Anne Sauvagesse, Marie-Louise Sauvagesse from the Montreal Island, Lachine area, and of course he. I was able to recognize who that person was, and I was able also to find Simferos Wawagukwe, who of course lived at La Baie and at Riviere St. Joseph in the Great Lakes region. So he was right, and he was right when he said that we Paquettes are Métis, we Paquettes are indigenous through our grandmothers. He had it right.
Great, thanks, Jim.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jim. You covered a lot of ground, and there were a lot of comments. So let's see if we can, I'll feed these to you.
Okay.
So I think you alluded to this already. I think it's Michael McCafferty mentioned that this name, meaning the Simferos, must be Ottawa, Ojibwe, or related Potawatomi. He said it's not Miami, and I think you addressed that.
Yeah, it was Wawagukwe versus Wawabukwe,
Yep.
whether you pronounce the G or the B.
Yep. So I think we're in agreement
That's
on
okay.
that. So Lorraine commented, it also did not indicate in the St. Joseph baptismal record that Simferos was actually ever at Fort St. Joseph herself. That baptismal record only indicates the presence of Jean-Baptiste Réaume and Marie Madeleine. Her comment.
Well, that's true. I guess, like I had said, that there's very little that we actually know about Simferos. I would find it hard to believe that she wasn't with her husband. When the post at La Baie was burned and deserted because of the fear of the Fox Indians that were invading that area, it would be, I guess, just common sense to me, at least, to highly suspect that she was at Fort St. Joseph with her husband and her daughter, who was there at that time. So I get, in a sense, you're right. It doesn't, we know that Jean-Baptiste was there because of other records, but those were French military records and fur trade records, and of course she wouldn't have been mentioned in any of those.
Let's see. So you did depict a painting that designated Marie Réaume. And someone wrote that this is of a Potawatomi woman named Massa.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
So that's I think that's like an 1820s depiction. Okay.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. What I did, I tried to depict as I was reading this, I tried to make a PowerPoint that actually depicted people that would have looked fairly close, whether they be,
Gotcha.
but people from the Great Lakes. And you're absolutely right. Some of the paintings I used were the people, the women involved are specifically named by the artists. Now, the other thing I didn't do is I didn't give any credits to the artists, which is, I put this thing together in the last couple of days, the PowerPoint, so I didn't have time to type in the credits. But I hope if any of them are out there that they take this as a compliment, that I was able to use some of these incredible paintings. A lot of them pretty early.
Yeah.
Paintings.
Well, just to be clear, there are no actual depictions of Marie Réaume.
None, zero.
Right. So, Suzanne, I'm going to let you come in on this here, where you write you're confused about this Lewison. Do you want to phrase that question to Jim and maybe keep it brief, Suzanne, if you're there? You can unmute yourself.
It is okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, Suzanne.
Lewison, and I'm going to have trouble talking with the back of my throat. So all I want to say is that Lewison also refers to the son, not to Louis Chevalier, who always spelled the name Chevalier with a double L, and who was the husband of Marie Madeleine. So I'm really confused about your reference in 1773 to Louison and his squaw wife. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Suzanne. Do you want to comment briefly on that, Jim?
Well, I guess, again, when you're going back and you're looking at, a letter and how, it's in how people's names are recorded, there's always going to be, room for discussion. And I'll say that. And I know Susan and I have actually talked about this in the past.
Yes, we have.
Is Lewis and Louison the same person? And I guess it's a matter of opinion,
Okay.
based upon our research. But I guess that would be a question that Susan and I can discuss. I think we've already discussed it at some point in the past, and I
Yes,
think
we
real
have.
good discussions
We have,
on it.
Jim.
So
Yeah, we have.
maybe at
Yes.
this point, I'll say we can agree to disagree at this moment. So
Yeah, in a sense, I think we agree. We agree more than we disagree, though.
Okay.
On certain things. Yeah. So
I
Okay,
can
so-
chime in on that if you don't mind. This is Lorraine.
go ahead,
Thank
Lorraine.
you. Thank you,
Uh,
Lorraine.
Lewis was also occasionally referred to in documents as Louison. It has to go, you have to go by the dates because Louison by about 1773, I believe, was already in the Missouri area.
Yes.
And so therefore it probably wouldn't relate to him in this case. And his wife was Helene Théon, who was, French Canadian, maybe Métis, but I don't know that she would have necessarily been referred to as a squaw. So in this case, I think it probably does relate to Lewis.
yeah, you bring up a good point as to where his son Lewis actually was at the time that those things were being recorded. And it is known that at some point, we don't know exactly when, but we do know there are some dates that says that he was out in St. Louis, he had moved to the south and to the west, into that country. So when you see some of these, transcriptions that were being written actually by British, they weren't being written by the French, they were being written by British. And so you see the name of Lewis and Louison, being bounced around. And I don't put a whole lot of stock in the fact that they're different. Because of that. And again, you got to take in the time period, but you also got to consider who was actually writing this and what kind of document was it. And
Exactly.
so, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. So we have a question from Diane here. She asks, what documentary evidence do you have that Madeleine Réaume or any of her husbands either of her husbands participated in the fur trade at Fort St. Joseph versus Michilimackinac or one of the Illinois posts in the Mississippi Valley?
Well, I think there's plenty of documentation. And again, a lot of the British recordings, if you look at some of the letters that really talk about the fact that Louis Chevalier was active in trading at Fort St. Louis. At Fort St. Joseph. I don't understand where this is even an issue among some people. And I know that there are those who say, well, that there's no record that they were ever involved in the fur trade. I don't see it at all that way. And I know that I can't do it right now, but I know I could provide evidence and documentation in descriptions, particularly of Louis Chevalier, the wife of Madeleine Réaume, that they were involved in the trade. In fact, the letters that you've seen from that I read that involved Van Slyck when he was there because he was actively trying to trade with Louis Chevalier and the Potawatomi people that were there with him. So so to say that there was no involvement, by him, is I don't think is correct. And I also see that when I notice when the British traders are ripping on Louis Chevalier and his squaw wife, that they also refer to her as being someone who is essentially actively involved in the trading network that's going on there, and that she was just as guilty as Louis Chevalier of instigating whatever was going on in terms of trying to attack these English traders. So there's a lot of evidence when I look at it. Maybe other people might see it differently, and I know that they do, and that's okay with me. And again, and I want to say this, what I wrote here and what I speak about, take it for what it's worth. It's my research based on my evidence. And so it's my findings. And what I like about doing this type of research is the same thing I like about doing archaeological research. You're not coming up with the final word on anything really. What you're doing is you're coming up with what is the evidence telling us here and now, and you hand that evidence off to others in the hopes that they will take whatever it is you found, whatever it is you wrote, whatever it is you discovered, and they will take that to the next step. And they won't take what I say or what any researcher would say strictly as the gospel truth. I didn't write the Bible, you know what I mean? But what I did write was what I have written.
Sure.
is my research report.
I think that's a healthy approach to it, to be sure, Jim. So Lorraine mentioned that one of the names was apparently misspelled on the document in the 1780. Namely, she's saying it's Pierre Riche as opposed to Pierre Niche.
Yeah.
If that's of interest.
Yeah. Here again, when you're reading, that's a translated document. And so what's happening is that you're going to see that the same thing occurs, even to this day, when people are trying to maybe to write down the spelling of someone's name. How is Ali spelled? How is Suzanne spelled? You know what I mean? Susan, how is that spelled? And there's multiple ways to spell a name. So depending on the author, whoever the author is, that's how the name is going to be spelled. It isn't because the person came there and wrote their name down specifically. It's because someone else wrote the name based upon how they heard that name, and that's just a fact. And so you're going to see multiple spellings for the same names when you're doing historical or genealogical research on these people that were living here in the 18th century. You very seldom find two documents in a row where the name is spelled the same. You're going to find names time after time spelled differently. One of the most notorious were the Jesuit priests who were trying to record names, and you'll see that in the official documents that they wrote, and then plus you're going to see the translated versions written by someone else who's trying to figure out what the priest wrote based upon what he thought the person said. So it's like you're going to see this whole montage of names for just about everybody, and I don't take that as I don't consider it a problem. I just consider it something that you just got to really be careful of, I guess, in a sense, but not avoid.
Okay, I think we have time for a couple more comments and a couple more questions. Let's see. Suzanne reminds us that the Fort St. Joseph page of the French Canadian Heritage Society of Michigan has documented articles and citations about the families of Marie Madeleine Réaume.
I would encourage anyone to go there and look at what they have. They've done an outstanding job of doing a lot of great research.
Thank you for that, Suzanne. Let's see. So one of our listeners and viewers asks, some screens that you displayed show transaction records expressed in livres, French units of money. Were these eventually settled in precious metal or converted into beaver pelt equivalents?
There's a very good question. That I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe Suzanne could tell you that. So I think that's maybe something that's Suzanne Somerville might be able to answer that.
Well,
I think
especially in the 17th century in the mother colony, beaver fur pelts became the money.
Mm-hmm.
There was not enough specie or whatever you want to call actual. Yeah. Thank you. Yes. So yeah, they traded in beaver skins, beaver furs, and they also used card money. They turned playing cards into cash. The card was signed by the intendant and the governor, and was for a certain amount of money, because they were short in the actual coins.
Yes, your point about a shortage of currency is certainly correct. At Fort St. Joseph, we have recovered one coin in 20 years of excavations. And even at Michilimackinac, in some 60 years of excavations, you can fit all the coins they've recovered in one hand.
Good
okay,
point.
Suzanne commented that Marie Madeleine's burial record states she was buried inside the church after
Yes.
having received the sacraments of penance and extreme unction. Burial inside the church was usually an honor bestowed on an individual. So an honor.
That's true. And if you read the transcript as written, it actually states that
Okay.
she was
very
buried
good.
inside the church, which is interesting.
Let's see. If our many time great grandmothers are Métis, can we legitimately call ourselves Métis?
I'm going to tell you the way I think it is. You can call yourself whatever you want, and
Okay.
but you know what I mean. But because I don't want to tell anybody who is of indigenous descent and European descent that you're not Métis. That's going to be something you have to make. But it's also it's a little bit more than that. I mean, I belong to a couple of Métis communities, and I'm honored to be members of those communities. But I'm Métis whether I belong to those communities or not. And for me, I consider myself to be Métis not only because of my ancestry, but it's also my lifestyle. If anybody who knows me knows that, one of the things I don't ever do is to do summer talks like I'm doing right now. This is gardening time. This is gathering time. This is berry picking time. This is fishing time. Come fall, don't even try to bother me because I'm in the woods and I'm out hunting with my grandchildren, my children, everyone. And what we do is that we're filling our freezer. Usually in the wintertime, that's when I will do talks because that's when I have time. That's when people, Native women used to do beading because there wasn't much to do.
Well,
and so I do is by speaking and writing and most of my research in the wintertime. Come spring, the whole seasonal thing starts again. And I begin doing other things. So this is really unusual for anybody to even see me this time of the year because of other things that I'm doing. So it's a lifestyle, but it's also, and it's also something that was, it wasn't only just me, it was my grandparents, my father, my mother, my children. We take our indigenous descendancy very serious. And we, and I don't even know what does that mean, but you can be whatever you want to be. But I think that if you want to consider yourself Métis, I think there has to be at least some more of a connection to maybe who that would be, in terms of a culture. But
great.
That's not really how it always works. Usually, if you can prove descendancy, then and at times you're thought to be Métis.
So
it's a great question. Awesome question.
Yep. We're almost out of time. One of the students commented how much they appreciate the time and work it takes to track down all those documents and construct this genealogical ancestry. And they were wondering if you actually worked with some of the physical records. And I imagine they meant here probably if you work with some of the primary documents as well.
No, I've never worked with any of the records there at Fort St. Joseph, if that's what they're asking, that are physically there. Most of what I worked with was Agnes Beauchamp, who I don't think anybody here knows. She was a tremendous French-Canadian genealogist who actually married a cousin of mine. And I worked with her, and she was very, very fluent in French and in deciphering French records. And she really taught me how to do a lot. A lot of things she actually just forwarded to me and sent me those things. Other things, it's incredible what you can find on the internet. You know what I mean? Google and the internet is a godsend too. So, and I tell people that if you're really looking to do research, really of any kind, go to Google and try to find things. And so the computer systems themselves have afforded me a great deal of information, on the things that I was looking for. Now, having said that, I'm gonna throw this out there just as a warning. I tell everyone, be very careful of what you see on the internet, because what I found is based upon my own research of just using basically primary documents and some secondary documents, but primarily primary documents. It's amazing how many mistakes have been made, particularly by historians when trying to resurrect some of these people and to talk about them. And in particular, Madeleine Réaume and the families that were at Fort St. Joseph. There's some really big mistakes that are made out there when some historians, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you who they are, but I'm looking at a stack of books right now. They're sitting in front of me, and in those books by some pretty good historians, they did historical research, but they didn't do genealogical / historical research when trying to find specifics to people who were historical figures. That not only includes Madeleine Réaume, it includes Charles Langlade. It includes, I mean, so many people that were noted as people who lived here in the Great Lakes region. Boy, there's a lot of misinformation that's out there regarding who those people actually were, where they were, what they did.
Great. Okay, thank you. Lots of great other comments here that are commending you. Someone asked if this will be available later on YouTube, and in fact, it will be. It will be on the YouTube, the Niles District Library YouTube channel. And let me just end with one comment here. Someone who I don't know, K8, wrote, "Thanks so much for this. I'm directly descended from Marie Madeleine's daughter, Marie Joseph Esther, who went to Cahokia. It's just interesting to see the trail the family made and why. I've seen so many of the documents, but appreciate them being put into this context." Thank you so much, Jim. I know we could talk for hours more, so we'll have to have you back maybe sometime in the middle of the winter during storytelling time. I know that's also part of your tradition, I suspect.
I'm good for that.
Great. So thank you so much. And we'll leave it at that. And I hope you all can join us in the open house in 2 weekends from now. And have a good evening. Thank you.
And miigwech merci for having me.